This is the Chapter 3 Stigma Podcast. This podcast was created to be there for any individual who feels like they are at a low point in life and are confused, seemingly alone, and helpless in their situation. I am a recovering alcoholic, and I felt this way too, until I sat across the table from another addict who shared his story and made me realize that I was not alone in my struggles. My life was saved by this realization, and I hope to help anyone struggling by sharing my story to show you that you are not alone and that life can contain unbelievable riches and meaning. Welcome. I am glad you are here. Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Chapter 3 Stigma Podcast and the first of the 2025 calendar year. In today's episode, I just wanted to take a few minutes and reflect back on this past year and really a year of healing, integration, and growth for myself and my family, and just also understand where we've come with regards to this work and the creation of the podcast and where it could potentially go, and then ways that you as a listener could help out as many of you have reached out expressing desires in that area. And so this year, just in summary, has been incredibly humbling, in a large part healing, and quite unbelievable. To be totally honest with you, when I started this podcast almost a year ago, our first episode was in early February. I really didn't know where this would go throughout the year. Really what my focus was to create a short and small library of resources that somebody in the future could come to in order to give them what I was calling a soft landing or a soft entry into the world of recovery. So often when people think about entering into recovery or addressing addiction issues, they think about extremely disruptive modes and methods to healing, such as rehab that I went through, or some other kind of outpatient care opportunity. And I wanted to create something that would be a different alternative for those that felt that and feel that their lives aren't going the direction that they want, that are dealing with anxiety and depression that come along with these addictive tendencies. And really what I wanted to build was what I needed at my lowest point. And so during the creation of nearly each and every episode, I really sat down and visualized my own self at my lowest points. And as I created and as I developed the podcast, I really focused on speaking to myself, my past self, sitting in my basement, curled up, suffering through the detox system. I could even visualize how I would draw my sweatshirt hood over my head and just hang my head and just hold it and beg and plead that the suffering would end, that the madness and the cycles would end, and that I wouldn't go back to drinking, and just knowing how desperate that I was to find a solution. And so the entry into creating this podcast, I truly planned to go right to chapter 3 of the big book and just kind of summarize it and leave it be and walk away and let it exist for others to come to and visit and hopefully find themselves within that content and within those words. And again, I've been asked a few times, but really the reason that this podcast is named Chapter 3 Stigma is because, in my opinion, Chapter 3 of the Alcoholics Anonymous book is the most impactful and profound writing and literature on addiction. And at least in my experience, what Chapter 3 really permitted me to do was hold a mirror up to myself and see myself reflected back in those words, and to feel the fear of judgment fall away as I connected with and understood that there were people out there just like me that suffered the same insane behaviors, thought patterns, emotional disruptions, and I wanted to provide that to folks. Now, the interesting thing and the totally unplanned thing is it took me 24 episodes to finally make it to Chapter 3 as I looked and approached the creation of this content. And so that was entirely unexpected for really the build up to what I see as the most imperative and pivotal pieces of content and literature on addiction. But again, the vision and goal of having this out there and accessible to people to create that soft entry, it has really played out in manners that I never expected. And so early on in the year, in 2024, I really realized that creating both the podcast and the newsletter of the same name, they were a really important aspect in my own healing and recovery journey. So Alyssa and I really approached the calendar year of 2024 as a year of healing for us, having just lost our daughter Lucy at the end of 2023, and knowing that we didn't want to rush the process, nor, in all honesty, put time constraints on it. We just focused about being deliberate about our own healing. And for me, with regards to my addiction recovery, I integrated that into that theme of 2024 of healing. So creating the podcast and writing the newsletter was a huge part of that healing journey for me. And while I had the hope that it would speak to and reach others, in all honesty, I never really planned on that being a requirement of creating this, nor did I plan on it actually having an impact as quickly as it did. I started hearing from many of you fairly early in the process, and I continue to hear stories about people that are connecting and using this work in their own recovery journey, or even in their own journey of healing from grief or suffering that life brings. And so that has been an unexpected and incredibly humbling aspect to all of this work. And so for those of you who have reached out, or whose stories have reached myself or Alyssa or my family, genuinely from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Your messages have motivated me for days and weeks after receiving them. Really understanding and knowing that you're not alone in this or unique in your struggles, for me, was the most eye-opening experience. And it happened for me while I was in rehab. And honestly, I can't think of a better way to say it, but I'm honored that this work is playing that role in some of your own journeys throughout this year. And so, again, I kind of made mention to this before, but Alyssa and I have spent some time at the end of the year here reflecting back on, our healing in 2024, as that was really the primary focus, and then looking ahead at what 2025 means for us. And we'll get into much more detail in this regard in a later podcast episode, because I do want to bring Alyssa back on and just kind of talk through how her and I progressed through the end of the year here in working through the milestones with Lucy's birth and her passing, as well as how we have sort of looked at taking the next steps and continuing to transform our lives and to grow. But when it comes down to it, where we've landed for the year of 2025 is that it's about growth. And we don't know what that means. I don't know what that really means with regards to my own recovery journey, as well as the podcast and the newsletter. I still maintain that this work, the podcast and newsletter, is my Forrest Gump run. And if and when it feels complete, I'm going to walk away from it. And my intention, especially with the podcast, well, both the podcast and newsletter, just the way technology has changed and allowed for the distribution and retention of this kind of content. Even if there's a point in time where I say this body of work feels complete, my vision and goal is to always make this available, so that years down the road, someone who is struggling might find it and might find themselves in recovery. The unfortunate thing about addiction and about the world of addiction is it's an evergreen space. And really what I mean by that is there are always new faces and new individuals that are coming into their addiction journey and starting to address their addiction journey. Unfortunately, addiction is not something that will, I don't think, ever go away. And so if this work can be maintained and help and support people even in years to come, even if there's not any net new content being created, then fine. I'm willing to pay that small price to do so, and that's my hope. But as of now, I do feel and sense that there still is a lot more that I want to explore and a lot more work and creation that I want to bring about in this space. So if you, because I hear from this request quite often, if you feel compelled or desire to help in any way, the greatest impact that you can have with regards to this work is to follow the channels across the various platforms. So for the podcast, it would be on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, or on YouTube. Those are the platforms that I've chosen to distribute on and focus in on. And outside of following or subscribing to the podcast, also leave a rating as well as a comment. And these three aspects, the follow or subscription, rating, and then comments, they help the various algorithms pick up on the content that is being delivered in this podcast and then distribute it accordingly to people where they might be searching out for addiction podcasts or recovery podcasts or something like that. So it might seem like a simple or potentially even meaningless task, but truly by subscribing, by rating, by commenting, you are helping to make this content more readily available for someone who is ready and potentially willing to enter into recovery. So those small and simple acts can have really compelling and powerful impacts to the distribution, the reach, and the accessibility of this content. And especially recently, I've started hearing from both loved ones of addicts as well as addicts themselves that are randomly stumbling upon this work as they have searched out for a solution. And that's one of the reasons I'm recognizing and realizing the power in getting or pushing people to subscribe, rate, and comment is that, as I've talked to and quite frankly, just bluntly asked people, like, how did you find this channel? I realize the power that exists in making it available to those that start with an internet search and start looking for, ways to help with addiction, ways to help with alcoholism, things like that. But when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, I'm just truly honored and humbled to be in this position, to be able to create, to have every single one of you in my life and involved in my own personal recovery journey, and ultimately that are there for the creation of this work. 2024 transpired in a way that I never could have imagined. And that is one of the reasons that I don't get overly prescriptive or descriptive when I think ahead to what is to come in the future, whether that be this next 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, or beyond. But just reflecting back, the incredible amount of growth and healing that has occurred, and in a big way through this work and through conversations with y'all, whether it's on the actual podcast or just conversations that spin off from this work, has been profound. And quite frankly, it feels like it's been necessary and just an imperative aspect to my own and my family's healing in this last year. So again, I'm completely humbled and honored to be in this position, to have you as a listener, and to have you, more importantly, just being someone that is loved and loves us and loves me in our life here. And so from the absolute bottom of my heart, thank you all. I wish you nothing but the best health, the best pursuit of growth, and at the end of the day, just genuine and true love and admiration and respect for yourself. Thank you all very much. That's all I've got. If you enjoyed this podcast, share it with others or give us a rating on your channel of choice. My hope is that my story can help others in their struggles with addiction or any other aspects of life that they feel could be bettered. You can follow us on social media at Chapter 3 Stigma on Instagram and YouTube. I cannot solve your problems for you, but I can listen. If you want to reach out with a message through one of those channels, I will respond and let you know that you are not alone. All the best, you are loved, and life is worth every struggle and bit of suffering you have to endure. Until next time, all the best.